Join us now for the expert source for inside information on the options markets. It's time for Options Insider Radio with your host, Mark Longo.
Welcome back to Options Insider Radio. Our next guest is another newcomer to the program. We're very glad to have her. We've bumped into her many times over the years at the various conferences and events, but we never actually had you on the show before. So I'm glad to finally bring you in. You can give some different perspective to our listeners on what's going on both in the option space and down in Washington as well. And she is, of course, Susan Milligan. She is the Executive Director at the Options Industry Council. Susan, welcome to the show.
Mark, I am so glad to finally be here with you.
Well, I really want to dive into the Washington stuff because I know that is your bailiwick. But before we do that, why don't you give ourselves a little bit of background on your position and what it is that you actually do at the OIC?
Okay, I'm the Executive Director of the Options Industry Council. And the Options Industry Council, as you know, Mark, is an organization, it's a partnership of OCC and our options exchanges, and we've come together to work on providing responsible education to retail investors, financial advisors, and institutional investors. We try to provide very balanced education, emphasizing both the risks and benefits of options. We do that through live seminars. We have a very good website, optionseducation.org. We have a live helpline where you can give a call and they'll answer your questions about options. We do, as I said, live seminars, and the website has a lot of great information on it. Classes, podcasts, webcasts. I think people will really like it if they check it out.
We love the website. We love the content. We send a lot of people your way every day. We feature a lot of OIC content, and we're happy to do it because, like I said, it is good stuff, and it's completely agenda neutral. It's just good quality content, which we love. You are the OIC face in Washington these days, which is an interesting job, I would think, in the past 6 months. But before we get into that, I know you guys just released and just announced last night, actually, the results of one of your, every 5 year or so studies on who actually trades options. And I love whenever you release these studies. You're pretty much the only people who really do this to this level of detail and this level of granularity. I know our listeners love to hear about who's actually trading this stuff. So let's just dive into some of the, I think, the key takeaways that you found from who actually is out there trading these things.
We did a study with Harris Interactive. As you said, Mark, we do these every 5 years. Our first one was actually 20 years ago. And what we found, let me give you the headline so that your listeners know what the headline is. And if they are options users, they can feel pretty good about themselves because options investors, according to our findings, are more knowledgeable, more affluent, they're more active investors, and they're more interested in learning about new investments.
I feel better already. I'm not just hearing that.
You should. And what we did was the methodology really briefly on this was Harris we partnered with 5 discount brokerages, and they gave us a sample of their options users and their non-options users, and then we surveyed both groups and compared what we found between the two groups. And as I said, those options people, more knowledgeable, more affluent, more active.
Well, that's certainly a message we've been getting out for a long time on our site and through our other venues that the options audience is one you want to reach. They're just better in general for a customer, for whether it's a brokerage firm or exchange, whatever it might be. So that's definitely something people are looking to reach out to these days. But, I'm not sure if you saw our newsletter went out this morning, but we actually put a few of your key takeaways from it, as much as we could squeeze in there really quickly in terms of a few graphs and a few charts. But if there's anything else you want to dig into that were really kind of salient points from that. I know you also compared people over the past 20 years and saw how the different demographic changes have shifted in the option space. We'd love to hear about any of that kind of stuff you want to talk about. The fact that women are or are not relevant players in the option space these days and how that really doesn't seem to have changed much over the past 20 years.
Well, here's the interesting thing about that, Mark. We do find, according to this survey, and obviously the surveys go out to more people than fill them out, and maybe this is just my bias as a woman. We tend to show the survey certainly shows that options investors, there are more men than women. I always wonder, since it's a survey, is it just because you men have more time to fill out the survey than the women?
Women running around with the kids and doing all the other stuff.
We're multitasking, and you're sitting there at your computers eating bonbons and filling out the survey. But I think that probably there are more men that trade options than women. And, OIC is what we do with this survey. I should probably talk about that for a minute. We've done these surveys for 20 years because we're really trying to figure out how to fine-tune the OIC program. Are we reaching the people that we need to reach? Is the education at the correct level for where the option users are? And for those who might be interested in options but not using the product, for where they are. So, one of the findings is that there are more men than are women that are options users. So we are taking a look at how can we tweak the programs to be more woman-friendly and reach out more to women. We're also we think that the findings of these programs are of this survey is very useful for OIC because we just launched a financial advisor program last year, and we think that this is really good stuff for financial advisors. You want options users as customers. They're more knowledgeable, they're more affluent, they're more active. So we're going to use a lot of the survey findings and package them and present them to financial advisors so that financial advisors are aware that these are the kinds of customers that you would like to work with.
No, I'm glad you brought that up because that's something we're always interested in. And obviously we have content on your OIC Advisor website. We're very active proponents of reaching out to that advisor community, and we have been for a long time. I know this isn't your bailiwick necessarily, but you can give us a quick rundown too on how that initiative is going, and you find that this kind of data is helpful in reaching out to those audiences. The people who, for all intents and purposes, if you look at paper, should be using options. I mean, these are managers of long-only assets, for the most part. They should be writing covered calls and buying protective puts, and they're just not for, a variety of reasons. So, yeah, if you can give us a little update on how that is progressing, that would be great as well.
The financial advisor program is a new one, really, at OIC. It's only been for the past year. We have a full-time consultant who works on that, Eric Cott. He's doing a great job. He reaches out.
He's been on the show several times as well, yes.
Yeah, he reaches out to advisors at their offices, at conferences, and we get a lot of leverage from that website as well. What we've done with the Harris study for financial advisors is we've put it into a handy-dandy little brochure where we've highlighted some of the most salient findings from an advisor perspective, and we're going to use that, I think, in conferences, and that'll be really the basis of what Eric's working on for the next year or so, to let the advisor community know you want to work with options investors. A lot of these people are self-directed. They know a lot on their own, but they may want to work with an advisor who also shares knowledge on options, and these are very desirable customers.
Yes. I don't want to hit all the main points, obviously, of the study because I think we'll definitely want to link to it on our site and drive people to you guys as well. And I encourage all of our listeners to go out there and read the entire study because if you're interested at all in options, this is some pretty fascinating reading. But I'm curious, as someone who looked at all the data, what do you think was the most fascinating or surprising thing that you learned from looking at all the past 20 years of options data?
There's kind of a hidden gem in the data, we think.
We love hidden gems.
Yeah. We ask non-options users, why don't you use options? And, historically, the largest percentage of them said, well, it's a risky and speculative investment. And that's still close to a third of the non-options respondents in this survey. But at this point, we are actually up to about 75% of the non-options users actually said for them the biggest barrier is they don't know, they're not knowledgeable about the product. For OIC,
that's bread and butter for you guys.
Yeah, exactly. What could be more perfect if people are becoming more comfortable with the concept of options? They're not just looking at it as, oh, it's risky and speculative, could never do that, but are more looking at, I don't use this product because I don't understand this product. That's what OIC is there for. We try to provide education at all levels, from the basic. We're about to launch a new podcast, The Language of Options, so that people can from the very beginning be comfortable with what is a put, what is a call from the very start, and then, help them through the spectrum of learning, into our basic, into our intermediate if they feel comfortable there, so that they have the confidence and knowledge to decide, is this a product, a tool that I should be using in my own investing?
I imagine that's probably a little surprising to you. 'Cause is that a lower percentage than years past, or is that pretty much about the same?
You won't believe this, but it's actually rising. But you know what?
Really?
We think that's good because the people who say that it's too speculative and too risky is going down. So we feel like people identifying the reason I don't use options is lack of knowledge actually says they're open to the product. And
Exactly.
so that's perfect for us. That's what we're all about is teaching those people and helping them figure out, is this a tool that I should be using?
Because the people who are usually in the too risky camp, those are non-starters usually. They hear the derivatives, and that's a 4-letter word to them. That's as far as the conversation goes.
Yeah, I think that's right, and that percentage really has been falling. I mean, in, our first survey in 1995, 45% of all the non-options users said, I don't use options because they're too risky. We're down to under a third now. And, I think that that's some progress just in people understanding that the product does have utility. It is very versatile. We want people to understand what they're doing before they use it, but it's good that we're getting the number who think this is just too risky and speculative down.
It definitely is encouraging, and like I said, I encourage all of our listeners to go to, I'm sure we'll have a link on our website. You can go to optionseducation.org to read the full. Is it up there now, or it's available now on their website as well? So you can go to it right now and check it out for yourself, and at least read the abstract, because I'm sure there's a lot of detail in there that I think would surprise you. But Susan, this is a rare opportunity we have you on the show, so I kind of want to transition a little bit and pick your brain a bit, because you are, like I said, you are the voice of options down in Washington, and there is no more contentious place in the derivatives world right now than down on the Hill in that area. So first off, I kind of want to know just how frustrating is it being the mouthpiece for derivatives down in Washington, a town where you're pretty much analogous to child porn down in that area these days.
No, Mark, that's not true. It's fascinating and a lot of fun, and I think really a large part of the mission of the Washington office of OCC, because that's really on the OCC side, is really making sure that members of Congress and their staff understand that there are differences between OTC derivatives and listed derivatives. Listed derivatives are regulated. If they're futures, they're regulated by the CFTC. If they're securities, they're regulated by the SEC. All the players in the listed markets are regulated. The broker-dealers, the FCMs, the clearinghouses, the exchanges, and making people understand that there are, regulated derivatives and there are non-regulated derivatives. That's kind of the first hurdle to get them.
I would imagine it must be pretty frustrating to go down there, being the representative of cleared listed options and being lumped into the same thing as OTC credit default swaps and everything else, because they kind of paint derivatives with that one very broad brush. So like I said, are you finding people are open to that discussion? Or are they kind of saying, oh, you're the representative of derivatives, all these things are in the same basket to me, and therefore you all must be kind of highly regulated?
No, I think the good news actually is that certainly the members of our oversight committee, the members of the Senate Banking Committee, House Financial Services Committee, Senate Agriculture Committee, and House Agriculture Committee, the members of those committees understand that there is a real difference between listed, regulated derivatives and OTC derivatives. And I think even the members of those committees understand that there's value to OTC derivatives. The question on the table is, should OTC derivatives become regulated in some way? Should they be, should there be record keeping that's required and reporting that's required? Should there be clearing? Should there be exchange trading? I think that, when you get beyond those committees, there are different levels of knowledge, but I think really the question in Washington is maybe has changed over time. I don't know that there's as much feeling that derivatives are just per se evil. It's more of a question of there's an unregulated swath of the derivatives world out there. How is it properly regulated?
Now, obviously, as a representative for the OCC, you speak from a clearing perspective on that sense. So are you down there advocating for, as we're hearing some proponents saying that they want to pretty much clear all derivatives, or are you saying some products still are not suitable for clearinghouses, or what is the message you're bringing to Washington when you go down there?
OCC's message on clearing is that clearing is a very powerful way to do risk management and take risk out of the system, but not all OTC derivatives should be cleared. There are many that are customized, and in our view, many that are standardized and very liquid, and in our view should be cleared. And there are others that are very customized. They're not liquid. It would be very difficult in a default situation to deal with those, and they really shouldn't be cleared. And I think overall, Congress gets that. I know it's probably anytime you say anything good about Congress, people get freaked out.
People roll their eyes a little bit.
I don't think they should feel that way. Really, the proposals that are on the table today, I think there is a real understanding that there are liquid OTC derivatives and they need to be cleared, and there are illiquid or customized OTC derivatives that really are not appropriate for clearing.
I'm glad to hear you say, A, that Congress gets that, and I'm glad to hear, B, that OCC isn't in the camp of all derivatives must be forced onto clearinghouse, because obviously there are products that are not very well suited to that. Now, I'm sure you're running around these days down in Washington trying to put out a lot of different brush fires. I know the transaction tax was a big one that seems to have kind of been tabled for the moment. And it's very hard, I think, for our listeners, even for us, to keep a track of what the day-to-day changes are. The bill changes 1 minute, one party adds 0 addendums, and it goes back and forth. So what are some of the brush fires you're running around right now and really trying to put out? I
do think that the transaction tax idea has lost a lot of momentum. I think that earlier this year when the administration came out and said actually it was more interested in the idea of exploring a levy, a bank tax on the largest banks, I think that really took the wind out of the sails of the transaction tax. And even the bank tax now is kind of in question because some members of the G20 don't like that idea, others do. So I don't think transaction tax is really actively under consideration today. So I think that's a good thing.
That is a good thing.
That would be very, very detrimental to the exchange-traded options markets. There's no question about that. But I think that's one that we don't really need to worry about for right now.
So what is on your radar then in terms of the pressing? Because is it still the short sales? Is it still the clearing? Or what are you spending most of your time on these days?
Well, we're following the Senate is now looking at and considering the financial reg reform bill. And, there are some issues in there. Once things get to the floor, what's interesting is the bill goes to the floor in one form. There's an amendment process. So a lot of what you're doing is you're trying to keep your eyes open and your ears open for any amendment that might be damaging to you. That amendment that might be ill-conceived and ill-considered and sound really good but not be good. So we're spending a lot of our time figuring out what kind of amendments are going to be offered and anticipating those. There are some provisions of the bills that of the bill that we really like, and then there are some provisions that we're not so wild about, so we're working on those. The bill does have in it, it's called Title VIII. It's Fed oversight for systemically important clearinghouses. And we think that's appropriate. We think it's appropriate for the Fed, which is a systemic regulator, to, in addition to the CFTC and SEC, be able to look at things like risk management standards and make sure that all the clearinghouses in the U.S. are meeting sort of the same kinds of standards. Part of that bill that we think is also important is that it would provide authority for the Fed to allow, it's discretionary, systemically important clearinghouses to access the discount window if that would ever become necessary. Now, no clearinghouse has ever done that, and that would be, in a short-term liquidity crunch would probably be the reason. And, the Fed is the lender of last resort, our central bank, and so we think it's appropriate that if there ever should be a shortfall in liquidity, say a clearing member default during the settlement cycle where, we take cash in at 9, have to pay it out at 10, we keep a lot of collateral around, and our clearing fund is very substantial. But
the Fed's a safety valve for that.
The Fed's a safety valve because we may not have sufficient cash. We may be illiquid. We may have plenty of collateral, but not enough cash. So we think Title VIII is a very good part of this bill. So we're on the lookout to make sure nobody wants to change that. And then there is a provision in the bill that we think runs counter to Title VIII that we've been working to try to get out of the bill.
Susan, I think I could sit here and pick your brain all day about all the various nuances of derivatives legislation. Maybe we have a separate show. We can just have derivatives lobbying in Washington and how that works and the different aspects of that. Maybe you can even add some content to the Insider one of these days, Washington Outlook or something like that. But like I said, we're really glad we finally had a chance to get you on the show. I think you bring some unique outlook and perspective to our show. And everyone wants to know about what's going on in Washington, and you are definitely the person to ask for that sort of thing. And so I wish you continued luck down there, and we'll definitely have to bring you on the show again down the road because these things are so fluid. And like I said, the bills and the amendments and proposals change day to day. And maybe if there are some interesting developments, we can do something again down the road to bring you back on the show. So thanks again for coming on. We'll look forward to having you on again.
I'd love to be on any time. Thanks very much for having me, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
And that's going to do it for this episode of Options Insider Radio. Be sure to visit www.theoptionsinsider.com for more episodes of this program, as well as breaking news from the options market, the latest articles and analysis from options experts, a wide variety of options education, and of course our discussion center where you can share your questions, comments, and insights with your fellow Options Insider users. While you're there, be sure to register for our monthly email newsletter, as well as our free email alert system. Our email alert system makes it even easier to stay up to date on the latest content from theoptionsinsider.com. Thanks again for listening. My name is Mark Longo, and I'll see you next time on Options Insider Radio.
Options Insider Radio was created by Mark Longo and produced by Gene Crotty. Options Insider Radio is a production of the Options Insider Incorporated, all rights reserved.